Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. We'd like to start the program, and I would ask that everyone please find a seat. Good afternoon. My name is Tom Dolan, and I'm the interim superintendent of the North Shore School District. Thank you for being here today for this memorial service and celebration of the accomplishments of Dr. Ed Melnick, former superintendent here. We chose to begin today with music, as we all know that was among Ed's passions. The song E Lucevan la Stella is about the love of life, a characteristic of Ed's that was certainly notable. That it was played on the clarinet is significant in that it was the clarinet that was Ed's instrument, and I thank Richard Blake for preparing it. We will feature several musical selections today and a few significant speakers. We begin our speakers with the next person who will occupy the superintendent's office, Ed's office, someone who worked closely with him and knew him well, Dr. Chris Zublionis. I also happen to know, by way of an email, how pleased Dr. Melnick was to learn that Chris had obtained this position. Chris?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. This is really great to see everyone. Some folks we haven't seen in a while, our North Shore family coming back together, albeit for not the most happiest of reasons. I'm so deeply honored to speak about our former superintendent and my mentor, Dr. Ed Melnick. As you can imagine, this past week and a half has been tremendously difficult for our entire community and also for those who Ed brought into this wonderful school district. Indeed, so much of what makes North Shore unique was built by Dr. Melnick and was inspired by his thinking and his energy, which was tremendous. When Betty called me with the tragic news, it was hard to process because his presence was such a big part of so many lives, everyone here certainly. For so many of us, Dr. Melnick is the reason we are here. If you were hired by him, you remember with great clarity that first conversation and how inspiring it was. I remember my initial interview with him in June of 2009 and how we talked, amongst other things, about living in New York City, what my dreams and aspirations were in my career, and Ed's grand vision for what we could do as educators. It was clear within the first few minutes of speaking with him that Dr. Melnick saw things differently, imagined possibilities for schools that were beyond the norm, and would push us to be our best. Ed lived and breathed North Shore, and his example taught us so much about leading with full investment and also leading in schools as a process of never arriving, that we should continuously seek improvement. As legend has it, one Glen Landing teacher strategically placed a bottle of brake fluid on Ed's desk as a funny indicator of how fast Ed moved. I'm not sure if he's here, but you might know who he is. For Dr. Melnick, every minute was a chance to do better and more work in the interest of moving children, and the standard of excellence and hard work that he set was clear from your first day of work here. Somehow, Ed made this standard, something positive, motivating, and rewarding. And we were all very happy always to work our hardest for him and for the children of North Shore. It was under his leadership that we established an elementary world language program, an elementary STEAM program, expanded our performance-based assessment initiative, supported the construction of the first turf field and athletic complex with community organizations, established a long-standing emphasis on developing student voice through Socratic discussion, and of course, it was his energy that led us to establish our shared valued outcomes. All of these efforts, as most of Dr. Melnick's ideas, were well ahead of their time. His support of innovative ideas for students, who he always referred to as our most precious natural resource, was a given. And that is what started the North Shore tradition of never resting on simply what we've done in the past or what others have done. This spirit of innovation and joy in education continues to run deep in our schools. I remember with great clarity the way in which Ed connected with students, parents, and community members and listened to everyone while at the same time introducing creative thinking through his questions. And this ability to connect translated into his presence at Board of Education meetings and other public events. That energy helped to transform ideas into reality. Ed was also such an amazing thought partner for his administrators and all who worked with him. He led through inquiry, and that trickled down to us. The way he would lean back in his chair and build that big rubber band ball while asking you tremendously thought-provoking questions that made you better and brought your thinking to the next level was just something so special. For me and for many others, he opened several doors of opportunity that would forever change our lives. We constantly refer to him and his impact in discussions between administrators and faculty, I'd say on a weekly basis. Ed showed his concern and care for you by always being involved and concerned with whatever was happening in your life. He was always available and always supportive whenever you needed it, and always led you to what was possible. He impacted thousands of lives in this community. In the last few weeks, personally, he had offered to mentor me and be there for me. And I know that he had continued to support many who work in this district throughout the years since he retired in 2017. North Shore and the universe is diminished without Dr. Melnick here. We will work to turn our tremendous sadness into inspiration to lead and think in the ways he did. Part of our protocol for planning going forward will certainly include WWEMD, what would Ed Melnick do? But the truth is, while his legacy will never be forgotten, it will also never be replaced. Thank you so much.
Two musical pieces will follow, a beautiful rendition of a Mozart piece, one that Mozart wrote for a friend, Anton Stoll, and the second, a Sondheim piece that conveys a message that Ed never forgot.
children will listen. Careful the things you do, children will see and learn. Children may not obey, but children will listen. Children will look to you for which way to turn, to know what to be. Careful before you say, listen to me. Children will listen. Careful the wish you make, wishes are children. Careful the path they take, wishes come true, not free. Careful the spell you cast, not just on children. Sometimes the spell may last past what you can see and turn against you. Careful the tale you tell, that is the spell. Children will listen.
Our next speaker is a member of the Board of Education who worked with Ed, contributed to the district's successes with him, and grew to admire him, as we all did. She also counted Ed among her friends, and one should never, ever discount that when talking about a board member. Ms. Amy Beyer.
As I've been reflecting upon my own time at North Shore with Dr. Melnick, I realized that every time I've spoken publicly before you, Ed was right by my side. While I'm honored to do so, I never imagined I'd be standing here without him, speaking about him in this capacity. Ed was a dynamic leader who touched and enriched the lives of so many in immeasurable ways. He was deeply respected at North Shore. So many former board members, faculty, staff, students, and families have come together today to pay tribute to the life he gave us. I first met Ed in 1996 when he was named interim principal at my daughter's elementary school, Glenwood Landing. Immediately, the students, faculty, and parents came to love him, and by the middle of that year, there were petitions circulating and calls to appoint him as full-time principal. Our relationship would shift 2 years later when Ed welcomed my son, who has autism, to kindergarten. As was Ed's mantra, every child deserved the opportunity to achieve their own personal best. I was worried that Gregory's behaviors might disrupt his classmates and shared that concern with Ed. He would say, "Amy, all kids have special needs. Yours are no different." He was confident this was going to work, and he was going to do everything he could to make that happen. And he did. Ed was a visionary. He would not take no or we can't for an answer. He was always miles ahead in thought and planning. He created a culture, and he supported that culture. He included everyone in the process. Everyone felt invested, everyone would buy in, and everyone would share in the success. He would say, "When members of an organization feel ownership over the direction of the organization, That's very powerful. Ed spent 30 years leading North Shore Schools as an educator, an administrator, and as a community leader. And as you've heard, he joined the district in 1987, serving his first 9 years as director of fine and performing arts, then, as I mentioned, principal of Glenwood Landing Elementary School, then assistant superintendent of instruction, and finally superintendent of schools for the final 14 years of his career. After Ed's move to central office, he would often share with me how much he missed being principal. He missed the daily interaction with the kids. He found joy in their wonder, their stories, their innocence, and their growth. He would carve out time to visit each of the schools, read to the kindergartners, and talk with the students and faculty. Ed truly enjoyed each and every role he held at North Shore, but principal was his most treasured. When my daughter gave birth last August, Ed's first reaction was, "I'm so excited to be a grand principal." After several years of working closely with Ed in our parent-educator roles, Ed encouraged me to run for the school board. As he did with so many of you, Ed saw something in me that I did not see in myself. The district was at a crossroads, and he was thinking ahead. I did not take that opportunity to run. The following year, Ed would be courted by the Scarsdale schools. I was panicked that Ed would leave North Shore. I met with him and promised him I would run for the board if he stayed. The stars aligned. Hours away from accepting the Scarsdale position, Ed was offered the assistant superintendency at North Shore. Ed was a very principled man, a man true to his word. If he made a commitment, he stuck with it, no matter what. He shared with me that had he accepted the Scarsdale position, he would not have reversed course. Who knew that just a few short hours could have changed the course for so many of us? Ed would lead North Shore for the remainder of his career, and I would keep my promise, serving the next 12 years beside him on the Board of Education. Ed worked long hours and was accessible to everyone. His door was always open to anyone who had an idea, a concern, or just needed some counsel. He welcomed his harshest critics, listening to, acknowledging, and addressing their points of pain. It was important, Ed would say, that they felt heard. During every budget season, we would travel with Ed to the homes of community members or visit with local community groups, such as the Golden Ring, Kiwanis, the American Legion, to name just a few. Ed was committed to engaging the broader community, earning their support, and educating them about the value of their schools. Personal connections were important to Ed and paramount to his success. Everyone here had a special connection with Ed. Everyone has a story. One of Ed's greatest qualities was his ability to find the humor in almost anything. He would say at the most difficult of times, the only way to get through it is to find the humor. So with that in mind, I'd like to share a few of my treasured, hopefully humorous, behind-the-scenes moments with Ed. Ed was always in a hurry to do everything. It could be the best and the worst of him. It enabled him to get so much accomplished, but it also could get him and the rest of us in trouble. So I would say to him, "Ed, when you get in that reactive mode, please call me before you hit send." Sometimes he would, and he would say, "Amy, aren't you proud of me? I didn't hit send yet." When Ed got going on something, it was difficult to make him stop. I had to come up with a strategy to manage him at board meetings when we needed to move on. Understanding his attention span, I knew I had to be creative. So I laminated different sized and different colored index cards so I could rotate them with phrases such as enough, stop, wrap it up, wind down. I would gently slide them in front of him as needed. Sometimes I had to vigorously point to the card. And he would say playfully, "Why don't you just kick me under the table?" You can only imagine how well that would have gone. We had a big meeting with parents at the middle school one night. It was an introduction to a change being made that was somewhat controversial. The meeting was difficult, and Ed was doing his very best to engage and explain, but it was a lot to process. I was in the audience, and after some time, I motioned to him. What did he do? He announced, "Amy Byer is in the back of the room doing this." I guess it's time to stop. After the Roslyn scandal, the New York State Comptroller started auditing school districts on a rotating basis. As we were neighbors to Roslyn, we were one of the first districts to go through the Comptroller's initial audit. The auditors interviewed board members, and I specifically remember the auditor asking me if I had reason to believe that the superintendent was keeping anything from the board. Very serious conversation. My response, I don't think he knows how to do that. Having spent several days with Ed already, the auditor nodded his head in what appeared to be agreement. In addition to his wonderful sense of humor, Ed's heart burst with compassion. There wasn't anything he wouldn't do for someone in need, and as a result, people wanted to do for him as well. When one of the fathers in the community took ill, Ed sent out an email informing the community where they could donate blood and platelets. If Ed asked for something, people rallied. The family would share that everyone at Sloan Kettering knew who Dr. Melnick and the North Shore community were. Who is this Dr. Melnick, they'd ask. They had never seen a drive of this magnitude, and they actually had to turn people away. And Ed was passionate about everything he loved. His passion continued into his retirement. Capping off his distinguished career as an educator, he was one of a select group of retired superintendents chosen by the New York State Attorney General to evaluate and make recommendations as to the quality and equity in the New York City school system. Ed voluntarily mentored and provided professional development opportunities to school leaders in Puerto Rico. And he continued to advocate for North Shore and for public education as a whole. You could often find him commenting on Facebook. That too prompted a few reminders. Ed, please call me next time before you hit send. Ed was traveling, gardening, cooking, taking Spanish lessons. He and Barry split their time between Puerto Rico, the lake house in Putnam, and their apartment in Manhattan. Upon his retirement, Ed said, I've been fortunate to not only have an incredibly rewarding career, but to make some lifelong friends in the process. That's a real blessing, and it's something I'll always treasure as I move forward. And he did. Ed spent quality time with good friends and family. He continued to enjoy life far more than many of us have or ever will. I spoke with Ed a few days before he passed. He was in a good place. We talked about all that had been accomplished at North Shore and the fun we had along the way. We talked about the bright future North Shore would have with its incoming leadership team. He was looking so forward to celebrating Olivia's retirement with her and reconnecting with his North Shore family. I never anticipated that would be the last time I would speak with Ed. Why would I? It's just something we all take for granted. While I didn't get to speak with him again, I'm so fortunate that he left a message on my voicemail the day before he passed, wishing me a happy birthday. I will forever cherish that message. Ed singing happy birthday to me in an octave only he could find. Ed shaped so much of my thinking. His vision fundamentally shaped North Shore schools for years to come. He positively impacted the lives of generations of students, faculty, and families. Ed made me a better person. He made us all better people. Every child deserves to have an Ed Melnick in their lives, someone would say. I hope that we can all continue to be inspired by what we've learned from Ed and keep that part of him alive within us. To me, one of his more profound messages was this. The word failure carries a negative connotation. Some of the best learning comes from failure. That's something we ought to celebrate. I will miss Ed's thoughtful perspective on just about everything. I will miss his wit and his wisdom. I will miss his friendship. I am forever grateful to have had a front row seat witnessing the magic of Ed Melnick, working beside him, learning from him, and most importantly, laughing with him. Ed's family could not be here today, but Barry asked that I share a few words with you from him. This is from Barry. Thank you for inviting me to join you in this memorial service for Ed. Ed was open to hearing everyone's concerns. He welcomed different perspectives and found a way to bring them into a whole. He valued having truly brilliant and compassionate people around him. Ed found in the North Shore schools an opportunity to do what he loved to do: education, administration, teaching, learning, enriching the lives of kids, and being a little mischievous himself. He continuously studied how to do these things better. He excelled at it and found great meaning in making a difference in the lives of others. I believe that the way we can keep him present in our lives is to practice what you remember to have been his strengths. It might be the way he would thoughtfully make a decision, or his curiosity, his inclusiveness, whatever that may be for you, incorporating the best practices and characteristics into your lives is a way to keep his memory alive. I'll miss him greatly, and I know that many of you will as well. And that's from Barry. For Ed's family and for all of us, I'm so deeply sorry that his time was cut short. Knowing Ed, I am sure he is planning to better the world as he always has, one student, one person at a time. As this tragic week draws to a close, I think to myself, how am I going to get through this? And then I am reminded, with humor, rest in peace, my dear friend, my special Ed.
A very favorite song of Ed's, one suggested by his family, and one that we all know will now follow. Our final speaker today is one who I asked to say a few words, as he is the current president of the North Shore Board of Education. Good, an able leader, and my friend, David Ludlow.
It's certainly good to see everyone here today, and certainly thanking everyone who put this together, and worth acknowledging that many of the people who were most integral in putting this together are also the most directly heartbroken by what we've experienced this week, and we thank you so much. The first school board meeting that I ever attended was about 10 years ago at Seacliff School. Trustees were grappling with how to save North Shore from the first round of LIPA revenue loss, and public comments were starting to get loud, pointed. Into that fray entered the voice of Dr. Ed Melnick, a voice people had come to trust for calm, poise, the voice of someone who had earned the respect of all corners of this community by advocating selflessly for our children and the fidelity of their education. At the time, I had no idea who he was or what superintendents and trustees did, but the clarity of his message stayed with me to this day. The path you choose is ultimately not my decision, he said. I work for you, and it's up to you as a community to decide the value you place on public education, the future of your children, and whether you want to respond to this funding challenge by moving backward, retreating, or by looking for solutions that will allow us to continue our journey together. It was a crystallizing moment, one of many in Ed's illustrious and wildly successful 30-year career of leadership here at North Shore. His framing and his thoughtfulness were integral in getting us through that night and so many of the nights that followed. Ed was so sharp. He was funny, as many of my previous speakers have shown, and he loved to laugh. He refused to go through life as merely an observer. He insisted on making a difference, and the needle on his moral compass always pointed to fairness and social justice. He was a collaborator who inspired people to be their best. He celebrated the unique strengths and passions of every child while encouraging them to recognize a world bigger than themselves. Ed was the very rare visionary who could actually convert his ideas into reality. Many people talked about breaking the devotion to test scores and the tired pedagogical routines, but it took Ed to innovate the SVOs as a viable alternative, focusing on the outcomes our children would need to find happiness and success as lifelong learners and lifelong thinkers. He transformed this district, inspiring so many educators, and our schools remain places of genuine inquiry and authentic learning. A North Shore education is a destination, not just a means to an end. And that is a huge part of Ed's legacy, and this board is most proud to carry that torch. A day like today should absolutely be about celebrating Ed's amazing life and the thousands of lives he made better, but it's also about acknowledging a collective loss that we're all feeling at his passing. Our hearts, of course, go out to Barry and Ed's family, and so many in our community who are stunned and hurting. I hope in time that we can all find comfort in our memories of Ed, our luck at being able to count him as a friend, and as someone who inspired us to bring our best to this world every day as he did. We are very lucky that fate brought Ed Melnick to North Shore, and so appreciative that he made our schools his home. Thank you.
The focus on music today is also a part of Ed's legacy. It's certainly a contribution that he made that we get to witness today and benefit from. Our final musical selection is another evocative one that several of us heard earlier in the year. It features our madrigal singers, superbly directed by Mr. David Catalano. I'm honored to represent the district today in thanking you all for being here. I would also like to thank several people for their contributions to this program, notably Ms. Dalia Rodriguez, the District Director of Fine and Performing Arts, my assistant, yes, my assistant, Ms. Betty Campy, for innumerable contributions and ready assistance, and Ms. Pat Lurch for her assistance with the floral arrangements. And of course, nothing happens without our custodial staff, ably led by high school head custodian Jerry Bertzel. Please feel free to stay and watch the slide presentation, one that we've been watching all week long at the central office, and it has kept our attention all week long, I assure you. Or you can join us in the courtyard, where we will have some bottles of water, some pleasant memories of Ed, and probably some laughs, no doubt. Thank you all for being here. And one more time, I give you Dr. Ed Melnick. Thank you very much.